Good morning. Welcome to Connect Daily Bread, where we recognize that man does not live on bread alone, but on every word that comes from the mouth of God. Today we're reading out of Acts 23, so here we go. Paul looked straight at the Sanhedrin and said, "My brothers, I have fulfilled my duty to God in all good conscience to this day." At this, the high priest Ananias ordered those standing near Paul to strike him on the mouth. Then Paul said to him, "God will strike you, you whitewashed wall. You sit there to judge me according to the law. Yet you yourself violate the law by commanding that I be struck." Those who were standing near Paul said, "How dare you insult God's high priest?" Paul replied, "Brothers, I did not realize that he was the high priest, for it's written, 'Do not speak evil about the ruler of your people.'" Then Paul, knowing that some of them were Sadducees and the others Pharisees, called out in the Sanhedrin, "My brothers, I am a Pharisee, descended from Pharisees. I stand on trial because of the hope of the resurrection of the dead." When he said this, a dispute broke out between the Pharisees and the Sadducees, and the assembly was divided. The Sadducees say there is no resurrection, and that there are neither angels nor spirits, but the Pharisees believe all these things. There was a great uproar, and some of the teachers of the law, who were Pharisees, stood up and argued vigorously. "We find nothing wrong with this man," they said. "What if a spirit or an angel has spoken to him?" The dispute became so violent that the commander was afraid Paul would be torn to pieces by them. He ordered the troops to go down and take him away from them by force and bring him into the barracks. The following night, the Lord stood near Paul and said, "Take courage. As you have testified about me in Jerusalem, so you must also testify about me in Rome." The next morning, some Jews formed a conspiracy and bound themselves with an oath not to eat or drink until they had killed Paul. More than 40 men were involved in this plot. They went to the chief priests and the elders and said, "We have taken a solemn oath not to eat anything until we have killed Paul. Now then, you and the Sanhedrin petition the commander to bring him before you on the pretext of wanting more accurate information about his case. We are ready to kill him before he gets here." But when the son of Paul's sister heard of this plot, he went into the barracks and told Paul. Then Paul called one of the centurion and said, "Take this young man to the commander. He has something to tell him." So he took him to the commander. The centurion said, "Paul, the prisoner, sent for me and asked me to bring this young man to you because he has something to tell you." The commander took the young man by the hand, drew him aside, and asked, "What is it you want to tell me?" He said, "Some Jews have agreed to ask you to bring Paul before the Sanhedrin tomorrow on the pretext of wanting more accurate information about him. Don't give in to them, because more than 40 of them are waiting in ambush for him. They have taken an oath not to eat or drink until they have killed him. They are ready now, waiting for your consent to their request." The commander dismissed the young man with this warning, "Don't tell anyone that you have reported this to me." Then he called 2 of the centurions and ordered them, "Get ready a detachment of 200 soldiers, 70 horsemen, and 200 spearmen, to go to Caesarea at 9 tonight. Provide horses for Paul so that he may be taken safely to Governor Felix." He wrote as follows: "Claudius Lysias, to His Excellency Governor Felix, greetings. This man was seized by the Jews, and they were about to kill him, but I came with my troops and rescued him, for I had learned that he's a Roman citizen. I wanted to know why they were accusing him, so I brought him to their Sanhedrin. I found that the accusation had to do with questions about their law, but there was no charge against him that deserved death or imprisonment. When I was informed of a plot to be carried out against the man, I sent them to you at once. I also ordered his accusers to present their case against him." So the soldiers, carrying out their orders, took Paul with them during the night and brought him as far as Antipatris. The next day, they let the cavalry go on with him. While they returned to the barracks, when the cavalry arrived at Caesarea, they delivered the letter to the governor and handed Paul over to him. The governor read the letter and asked what province he was from. Learning that he was from Cilicia, he said, "I will hear your case when your accusers get here." Then he ordered that Paul be kept under guard in Herod's palace. All right, so Paul before the Sanhedrin. It was really interesting to see his wisdom here, and also I think, quite frankly, his humor and sarcasm. So he starts out and says something true. "My brothers, I have fulfilled my duty to God in all good conscience to this day." And the high priest orders that he be hit in the mouth. And Paul responds forcefully, God will strike you, you whitewashed wall. You sit there to judge me according to the law, yet you yourself violate the law by commanding that I be struck. So a pretty terrifying response. Imagine putting yourself in those shoes for a moment, that you order somebody to be punched in the face. They get, that punch is delivered, and that person responds and says, God's going to strike you. So a terrifying response. But there's a biblical basis for that. Don't avenge yourself. The Lord, vengeance belongs to the Lord. And then these guys, well, how dare you insult God's high priest? And then I think this is total sarcasm here. Some scholars go on wonky routes with this, but knowing Paul's writing and seeing his personality in this, he says, "Oh man, that was wrong. I didn't know that he was the high priest. For it's written," and he goes back to the law, that this high priest and all of them have just violated, as they've been doing for years and years. They don't give a rip about the law. They care about what serves them. And so he goes back to the law and says, "Do not speak evil about the ruler of your people." And then he immediately throws a grenade out there that this group's divided on, half being Pharisees, roughly half being Sadducees, and it has to do with the resurrection of the dead. Pharisees believe that's a reality that will come. Sadducees do not believe that will come. So he plays the Pharisee card. Well, I'm a Pharisee, born of Pharisees. I'm here today because of the hope of the resurrection, which is true. The resurrection has taken place and begun in Jesus. That's where the Pharisees who perpetrated that execution of Jesus missed the mark. But he lays this out, and it has the intended effect. Now they're ready to tear each other apart, Sadducees and Pharisees. Paul has to be removed out of there because it's so wild. And Jesus comes personally to Paul the next day, telling him to take courage, and that as he had testified about Christ in Jerusalem, he would do the same in Rome. So the rest of Acts will be that process of him getting to Rome to testify about Jesus. But once the promise is made, it's signed, sealed, and delivered. So there's a plot to kill Paul from some 40 guys. They weren't going to eat or drink until they killed Paul. They're working with the dirty, rotten Sanhedrin to, instead of a pretext of him coming, well, Paul's nephew finds out about this and relays his message to Paul initially, and then to Paul sends him to the commander. And so the commander decides to have Paul sent elsewhere, protected that evening at 9 p.m. And then as we get access to the letter that he wrote, and there are some details. He fibs a little bit. He leaves out details. This man was seized by the Jews, and they were about to kill him, but I came with my troops, and I rescued him, for I had learned that he is a Roman citizen. He kind of leaves out the part that he had ordered him to be flogged before he found out that he was a Roman citizen. But he sends he's trying to be tactful here. Sends a guy along. And, basically we're told he arrives safely there. Governor reads the letter, realizes that Paul, coming from Cilicia, is in his jurisdiction, so he's going to have Paul stay at Herod's palace under arrest, and then he is going to hear this case. So that's my thoughts on Acts 23. Share what stood out to you. Love you guys. Have a good one.